Welcome, sleepy soul. Tonight, we were slipping under the itchy woolen blankets of history to explore the truly bizarre bedtime rituals of medieval folks. Forget dragons and dungeons. This is the real medieval madness. Segmented sleep, turnip pillows, monks who napped in confession booths, and peasants who spooned with goats for warmth, and occasionally for gossip. If you've ever wondered how people slept before alarm clocks, memory foam, or the concept of personal space, you're in the right place. This is Weird Sleep Habits of Medieval People and More, a bedtime story so delightfully dull, it might just knock you out faster than a goblet of poppy ale. So tuck yourself in, dim the torchlight, and prepare to drift off to tales of snoring nobles, blanket battles, and the mysterious art of medieval midnight cheese poetry. Like this video if your mattress isn't made of straw, and regret subscribe if you've ever woken up wondering whether you were a 14th century monk in a past life. And drop a comment below telling me where you'd be watching from, whether it's London or a suspiciously haunted hayloft in 1347. In the medieval world, bedtime wasn't a single, uninterrupted plunge into slumber. No, sleep came in 2 acts, like a badly rehearsed village play. The first sleep began shortly after sunset, when candles flickered, livestock settled, and peasants collapsed onto straw mattresses with the enthusiasm of overworked turnips. This first sleep lasted a few hours. It was deep, dreamless, and often accompanied by the gentle chorus of snoring, wheezing, and the occasional goat hiccup. People didn't just sleep, they committed to it. They bundled into beds with family members, neighbors, and sometimes a chicken named Gerald. Privacy was a luxury reserved for nobles and hermits with questionable hygiene in a small monastery tucked between 2 hills that looked suspiciously like sleeping giants. Brother Alwyn prepared for his nightly descent into the first sleep. He was a monk of mild ambition and strong opinions about cheese. His bed was a wooden slab softened by a blanket made of woven regrets and sheep wool. He lay down with a sigh that echoed through the stone corridors like a Gregorian chant of exhaustion. Alwyn's first sleep was sacred. It was the only time of day when he wasn't expected to pray, chant, scrub floors, or explain why he kept sneaking into the pantry to write poetry about dairy products. His latest verse, Ode to the Crumbly Wheel, had earned him both admiration and a stern talking to from Brother Tuckwell, who believed poetry should rhyme and never mention mold. As the monastery settled into silence, the stars blinked overhead like sleepy fireflies. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, whispering lullabies in Latin. Inside, Alwyn drifted into his first sleep, dreaming of cheese wheels rolling down hills and monks chasing them in slow motion. But medieval sleep was never simple. In just a few hours, Alwyn would wake, not for morning prayers, but for the mysterious, often overlooked interlude known as the midnight gap, a time when the world stirred, thoughts wandered, and monks like Alwyn scribbled verses by candlelight while nibbling illicit cheddar. And so, the first sleep began, deep, strange, and just the beginning. Somewhere between the first sleep and the second, the medieval world stirred, not fully awake, not quite dreaming. It was a time of quiet footsteps, whispered prayers, and the occasional accidental toe stub on a chamber pot. This strange interlude, known simply as the midnight gap, was as common as it was confusing. Unlike modern sleep, which aims for one long, uninterrupted snooze, medieval folks often woke naturally after a few hours. No alarms, no notifications, just a gentle rise from slumber, as if their bodies had collectively agreed, let's take a break and see what the moon's up to. In the monastery, Brother Alwyn blinked into the candlelit gloom. His first sleep had been pleasant, filled with dreams of cheese wheels and Gregorian chants sung by dairy cows. Now, he sat upright on his wooden slab, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of incense and regret. This was his favorite time. The monastery was silent, save for the soft creak of old stone and the occasional snore from Brother Tuckwell, who had mastered the art of sleep singing. Alwyn lit a candle, dipped his quill in ink, and began scribbling his latest poem. O cheddar moon, so pale and round, you haunt my dreams without a sound. I nibble thoughts, I taste the night, and pray my cheese shall not take flight. He paused, satisfied. Midnight was a sacred hour for creativity. Across the village, others were awake too. Some praying, some tending fires, some sneaking bites of leftover stew. A few were simply staring into the dark, wondering if their dreams had been prophetic or just indigestion. Segmented sleep wasn't considered strange. In fact, it was often welcomed. The midnight gap allowed time for reflection, intimacy, or in Alwyn's case, dairy-themed literature. It was a pause between worlds, a liminal space where thoughts wandered freely, and socks were never quite warm enough. Outside, the moon hung low like a sleepy eye. A fox padded silently through the monastery garden, sniffing at herbs and judging the monks' landscaping choices. Alwyn yawned, stretched, and tucked his poem under his pillow, a sacred place where all his best verses fermented overnight. Soon, the second sleep would arrive, deeper, dreamier, occasionally interrupted by the sound of Brother Tuckwell reciting psalms in his sleep. But for now, Alwyn leaned back, candle flickering beside him, and let the midnight gap cradle him in its quiet, peculiar charm. In the medieval countryside, bedtime was less about comfort and more about survival. While nobles nestled into feather-stuffed mattresses behind velvet curtains, peasants made do with whatever didn't bite, itch, or squeal. Their beds were straw-filled sacks, their blankets were patched wool, and their pillows, well, sometimes they were turnips. Yes, turnips. Agnes, a sprightly turnip farmer with a suspiciously accurate dream journal, swore by her root-based pillow. Keeps the neck firm, and the visions vivid, she'd say, tucking herself in beside a pile of freshly harvested tubers. Her neighbors thought she was odd, but they also came to her for dream interpretations, turnip recipes, and occasionally relationship advice. Peasant homes were one-room wonders. The whole family slept together, often with a few chickens, a goat named Harold, and a cat who refused to acknowledge personal boundaries. Privacy was a myth. If someone snored, everyone knew. If someone dreamt of flying, someone else probably got kicked in the ribs. Straw mattresses were the norm. They were scratchy, lumpy, and occasionally home to bugs with questionable ethics. Still, they were better than sleeping on bare wood or cold stone. Peasants fluffed their straw nightly, hoping to redistribute the lumps and dislodge any free-loading beetles. Agnes had a ritual. Each night, she'd lay out her turnip pillow, sprinkle a few dried lavender petals on her straw bed, and hum a lullaby about a knight who fell asleep during battle and woke up married to a goose. Then she'd drift off, dreaming of weather patterns, crop yields, and once a very detailed prophecy about the baker's runaway sourdough starter. Her dreams were legendary. She once predicted a rainstorm 3 days early, a cow's pregnancy, it was a goat, and the exact moment Brother Alwyn would drop his candle and set his robe on fire. She claimed the turnip whispered to her in sleep. Others claimed she needed less poppy ale. Still, in a world where sleep was segmented, uncomfortable, and occasionally shared with livestock, Agnes found peace in her straw bed and root pillow. She believed dreams were messages. Sleep was sacred, and turnips were the key to unlocking the universe. And so, as the moon rose and the village settled into its first sleep, Agnes snuggled into her earthy pillow, whispered goodnight to Harold the goat, and drifted off, ready to dream of rain, romance, and possibly a talking cabbage. In the medieval countryside, bedtime wasn't just about rest. It was about readiness. Peasants didn't just sleep. They strategically collapsed, with threats ranging from wandering thieves to overly affectionate goats. Many chose to sleep with their tools tucked beside them, like medieval teddy bears. The sickle was a popular bedmate, sharp, curved, and mildly terrifying. It offered both comfort and defense. Farmers would nestle it under their straw mattress or lay it gently beside their sleeping form, just in case someone tried to steal their turnips, or worse, their blanket. Agnes, our beloved turnip prophetess, kept her sickle close. Not for violence, mind you, but for inspiration. It whispers to me, she once said, stroking the blade like a sleepy cat. Last night, it told me the baker's sourdough will rise too early. She was correct. The loaf exploded at dawn. Livestock often joined the slumber party. Chickens roosted in corners, pigs snored under tables, and goats, especially Harold, had a habit of curling up beside humans like judgmental pillows. Harold preferred Agnes's bed, mostly because she didn't snore and occasionally offered him bedtime turnip slices. Sleeping with animals wasn't just cozy, it was practical. They provided warmth, companionship, and a built-in alarm system. If something rustled outside, the goat would bleat, the chicken would squawk, and the pig would roll over dramatically. It was like living inside a medieval security system, powered by hay and attitude. Tools weren't limited to sickles. Some peasants slept with hammers, ladles, or even their favorite hoe. One man reportedly cuddled his wheelbarrow, though historians suspect exaggeration or loneliness. Still, the idea of sleeping with one's livelihood was common. It was a way to stay connected, protected, and occasionally poked in the ribs by a misplaced rake. Agnes once dreamt of a future where people slept without tools, in rooms with doors that locked and beds that didn't crunch. She woke up laughing. "Ridiculous," she muttered, adjusting her sickle and tossing Harold a turnip. "Next, you'll tell me people sleep alone." And so, as the stars blinked overhead and the village settled into its second sleep, peasants snuggled into straw, tools by their side, animals at their feet, and dreams full of mildly threatening vegetables. It wasn't luxurious, but it was theirs. While peasants snuggled into straw and turnips, the nobility slept like they were auditioning for a mattress commercial sponsored by Divine Right. Their beds were grand, wooden frames carved with lions, saints, and occasionally passive-aggressive Latin phrases. Feather mattresses, velvet curtains, and embroidered sheets were standard. Comfort was expected, Warmth was mandatory. Privacy was a performance. Lord Percival of Drowsingdale took sleep very seriously. His bed was a four-poster monstrosity, with curtains so thick they could block out sunlight, moonlight, and most forms of gossip. He called it the Fortress of Slumber, and it came with a footstool, a bell for summoning warm milk, and a small drawer labeled Emergency Biscuits. Despite his luxurious setup, Percival was plagued by one persistent enemy, morning. No matter how many feathers he fluffed, or how many tapestries he commissioned of himself sleeping heroically, he could not escape the dawn. Roosters crowed, bells rang, servants tiptoed in with passive-aggressive breakfast trays. It was intolerable, and so Percival devised a plan, the bed moat, inspired by castle defenses and a particularly vivid dream involving ducks. He ordered his groundskeeper to dig a shallow trench around his bed. "It shall be filled with lavender water," he declared, and patrolled by sleepy swans. The groundskeeper nodded, then quietly asked the cook for extra poppy ale. The moat was built. Lavender was poured. Swans were bribed with breadcrumbs. Percival slept that night with a smug smile, confident that no rooster would dare cross his aquatic barrier. Unfortunately, he forgot to tell the servants, who tripped into the moat at dawn and spilled his emergency biscuits. Still, the noble obsession with sleep was real. Beds were symbols of status. The more elaborate the bedding, the more important the sleeper. Some nobles even traveled with portable beds, folding contraptions that resembled tents made of silk and ego. Others hired bed warmers, servants who preheated the mattress with hot stones and existential dread. Percival once commissioned a pillow stuffed with falcon feathers. It was soft, regal, and mildly judgmental. He claimed it improved his dreams, though he also claimed to have invented the concept of napping, so credibility was thin. And so, in the candlelit chambers of Drowsingdale, Lord Percival snored behind velvet curtains, surrounded by lavender water, feathered pillows, and a moat that smelled faintly of misplaced ambition. It wasn't practical, it wasn't necessary, but it was noble. Lord Percival of Drowsingdale had many enemies: cold porridge, itchy embroidery, and the most persistent of all, morning. Despite his lavender moat, feather fortress, and embroidered eye mask that read, "Do not disturb unless you're a biscuit," dawn always found a way in. And it didn't knock politely. It began with the roosters. These feathery alarm clocks had no concept of nobility. They crowed with reckless abandon, often while standing directly beneath Percival's window, as if auditioning for a role in his nightmares. He once tried bribing them with breadcrumbs and flattery. They responded by crowing louder. Then came the servants, trained in the art of gentle awakening. They tiptoed into his chamber, bearing trays of lukewarm milk, stale bread, and passive-aggressive commentary. "Good morning, my lord," they'd whisper. "The sun has risen. Unlike your productivity." One servant, Cedric, specialized in opening curtains with theatrical flair and announcing the weather like a disappointed bard. Percival tried everything. He commissioned blackout tapestries depicting eternal night. He installed a bell system that rang only when someone didn't enter his room. He even hired a man named Gregory to impersonate a rooster and crow at noon instead. Gregory was enthusiastic, but tone-deaf. The nobleman's sleep was under siege. His dreams, once filled with velvet clouds and cheese banquets, were now interrupted by visions of roosters in battle armor and Cedric wielding a tray like a sword. He began referring to his bedroom as the last bastion of slumber and insisted on nightly strategy meetings with his pillow. One morning, in a fit of desperation, Percival declared a new law. No one shall wake me before the third bell of the day, unless the castle is on fire or the porridge has improved. The servants nodded solemnly, then immediately ignored it. Despite his efforts, dawn always won. The roosters crowed. The servants marched. The sun spilled through cracks in the curtains like a nosy neighbor. And Percival, noble and exhausted, would rise with a sigh, muttering, "One day I shall invent a bed that sleeps for me." And so, in the grand halls of Drowsingdale, morning arrived like an uninvited guest, loud, persistent, and slightly judgmental. Percival endured it with dignity, sarcasm, and a growing suspicion that the roosters were plotting something. In the medieval mind, dreams weren't just nighttime nonsense. They were divine telegrams, celestial memos, or occasionally passive-aggressive notes from the saints. People believed dreams could predict the weather, reveal hidden sins, or warn you about your neighbor's suspiciously large turnip harvest. Enter Hilda, the village dream interpreter. Hilda lived in a cottage that smelled faintly of onions, beeswax, and misplaced ambition. She wore robes made of mismatched curtain scraps and carried a pouch filled with dried herbs, chicken feathers, and one very judgmental potato. Her services were in high demand, especially among the villagers who had recently dreamt of flying pigs, talking bread, or their mother-in-law turning into a goose. Her fee, 1 onion per vision, 2 if the dream involved royalty or livestock with hats. Agnes, the turnip prophetess, once visited Hilda after dreaming of a goat reciting poetry. Hilda nodded solemnly, chewed an onion slice, and declared, "It means your destiny is tangled in wool and betrayal." Agnes blinked. "I think it just means Harold's been listening to Brother Alwyn again." Hilda's interpretations were creative. A dream of falling meant you were spiritually ascending. A dream of swimming meant you were emotionally drowning. A dream of cheese meant you were either blessed or lactose intolerant. She hadn't decided yet. Despite her questionable accuracy, villagers adored her. She brought drama to their dreams, meaning to their midnight cheese hallucinations, and a sense of purpose to their segmented sleep. People would wake during the midnight gap, scribble down their visions, and rush to Hilda at dawn, onions in hand and confusion in their hearts. She kept a dream ledger, an enormous book filled with sketches, notes, and doodles of winged turnips. One entry read, "Farmer dreamt of dancing pigs. Interpretation, impending rain or emotional constipation." Another read, "Child dreamt of flying over the village. Interpretation, future baker or current liar." Hilda believed dreams were sacred. She also believed her potato could detect lies. It hadn't been wrong yet. And so, in the flickering candlelight of medieval bedrooms, dreams bloomed like sleepy flowers. Strange, vivid, and occasionally narrated by goats. And Hilda, onion in hand, stood ready to decode them all, one confused metaphor at a time. In the medieval imagination, sleep was not a neutral zone. It was a battlefield, a place where dreams could bless you, or beasts could sit on your chest and judge your life choices. What we now call sleep paralysis, they called night hag visits, goblin squats, or the pressing, charming, Villagers believed that if you woke up unable to move, with a heavy weight on your chest and a creeping sense of dread, it wasn't a neurological hiccup. It was a creature, a goblin, a witch, or sometimes a very rude spirit named Gerald. Gerald was blamed for everything from bad dreams to missing socks. Agnes, the turnip prophetess, once experienced the pressing after eating 3 bowls of onion stew and falling asleep with her sickle. She awoke frozen, eyes wide, convinced Harold the goat had turned into a demon and was reciting Latin. Turns out, Harold had just knocked over a candle and was chewing on her dream journal. To ward off these nighttime intruders, people used charms, prayers, and questionable logic. Garlic under the pillow, iron nails in the bedpost, a drawing of Saint Benedict riding a chicken. Hilda, the dream interpreter, recommended sleeping with one eye open and a potato in each sock. It confuses the spirits, she explained, and keeps your feet humble. Some believed the creatures were drawn to guilt. If you'd stolen bread, insulted a monk, or forgotten to compliment your neighbor's turnip crop, you were fair game. Others thought they came for the dreams, especially the juicy ones, involving flying pigs or romantic encounters with cheese merchants. Brother Alwyn, ever the poetic monk, wrote a verse about it. A weight upon my chest did creep. A goblin rude disturbed my sleep. He whispered truths I dare not keep, then stole my socks and fled too deep. Despite the fear, there was comfort in the ritual. People shared stories, swapped remedies, and bonded over their mutual suspicion of nighttime goblins. It was a communal paranoia, wrapped in folklore, embroidered in superstition, and occasionally blamed on Harold. And so, as the village settled into its second sleep, garlic tucked under pillows and potatoes, warming toes, the night grew quiet. The goblins, if they came, found themselves confused by sock vegetables and Latin reciting goats, and the sleepers, frozen or not, dreamed on. In the medieval monastery, sleep was not a right, it was a negotiation. Monks lived by the rule of Saint Benedict, which, while spiritually enriching, was also suspiciously allergic to uninterrupted slumber. Their nights were sliced into sacred segments, punctuated by bells, chants, and the occasional existential sigh. The schedule was brutal. Just after the first sleep, the bell would ring for matins, the midnight prayer. Monks would rise, shuffle into the chapel like holy zombies, and chant psalms in Latin while trying not to yawn in front of the abbot. After matins came lauds, then prime, then terce, and so on, until the sun rose and everyone pretended they weren't sleepwalking through breakfast. Brother Tuckwell, a monk of mild rebellion and impressive nap instincts, had a theory. If God made dreams, surely he wouldn't mind a little extra sleep. This theory was not widely accepted, but it was deeply practiced, especially behind choir stalls and under strategically draped robes. Tuckwell invented the holy nap cloak, a garment so voluminous it could conceal a seated snoozer, a small goat, or a modest cheese wheel. He claimed it was for warmth. The abbot suspected otherwise. Still, Tuckwell managed to doze through 3 psalms, 1 sermon, and a particularly long reading about the moral dangers of laughter. Monks weren't supposed to sleep during prayers, but the human body disagreed. Some leaned against pillars. Others perfected the art of standing naps. One monk reportedly fell asleep mid-chant and woke up harmonizing with a candle. It was considered a miracle. Despite the interruptions, monks found peace in their fragmented sleep. The midnight hours were quiet, sacred, and oddly comforting, the flicker of candlelight, the echo of chants, the gentle rustle of robes. It was a rhythm, strange, exhausting, but deeply woven into their spiritual lives. Brother Alwyn, our cheese-loving poet, often scribbled verses during the midnight gap. Tuckwell, meanwhile, perfected the prayerful posture of restfulness, kneeling with eyes closed, hands folded, and dreams of warm bread dancing behind his eyelids. And so, in the stone halls of the monastery, sleep came in fragments, interrupted, imperfect, and occasionally disguised as devotion. The monks endured it with grace, creativity, and a growing appreciation for naps that didn't require confession. In the monastery of St. Wistful's Hollow, sleep was rationed like sacred wine, precious, rare, and occasionally smuggled. The monks, bound by devotion and a schedule that seemed designed by someone who hated pillows, found themselves inventing new ways to nap without divine disapproval. Brother Tuckwell, patron saint of stealthy slumber, had become something of a legend. His holy nap cloak had allowed him to snooze through 3 sermons and 1 accidental wedding. But now he sought a new frontier, the confessional booth. It was perfect, quiet, private, lightly padded with gilt. Tuckwell would slip inside, close the wooden screen, and assume the posture of deep, spiritual listening. In reality, he was dreaming of a warm bread and Gregorian chants sung by sheep. The abbot grew suspicious. "Brother Tuckwell," he said one morning, "you seem unusually refreshed for someone who attended all 7 prayer services." Tuckwell nodded solemnly. "I have been spiritually exfoliated," he replied, which made no sense but sounded holy. Other monks followed suit. The choir stalls became prime nap zones, with heads bowed and robes draped. They resembled statues of devotion, until one snored in harmony with the hymn. Brother Alwyn, ever the poet, called it the sleepy psalm of Saint Snore. Some monks took to strategic kneeling, resting their foreheads on the pew in what looked like intense prayer, but was actually a nap, so deep it included a dream about flying turnips. One monk claimed to have received divine inspiration while asleep. He later admitted it was just a recipe for onion stew. Despite the risks, these covert naps became part of monastic culture. There was an unspoken understanding. Sleep was scarce, and if you could find it between chants, confessions, and candle duty, you were blessed, or at least clever. Brother Tuckwell eventually published a scroll titled The Art of Holy Napping, which included techniques like the cloaked collapse, the psalmic slouch, and the confessional curl. It was banned immediately, then secretly copied by every monk in the region, and so, in the dim stone halls of St. Wistful's, sleep came in stolen moments, between prayers, beneath robes, inside booths, meant for repentance. It wasn't restful, but it was resourceful, and in the quiet corners of devotion, the monks dreamed on, softly, sneakily, and with great spiritual sincerity. In medieval peasant homes, bedtime was a communal affair. Privacy was a myth. Personal space was a luxury, and the concept of sleeping alone was reserved for hermits, nobles, or people who snored so violently they were exiled to the barn. The family bed was the heart of the home, a lumpy straw mattress stretched across a wooden frame, or sometimes just the floor, where parents, children, and occasionally livestock piled in like sleepy sardines. It was warm, crowded, and smelled faintly of onions, wool, and dreams. Greta the baker lived in one such home. Her bedmates included her 2 children, a sourdough starter named Fergus, kept warm under a blanket, and Harold the goat, who had decided long ago that Greta's bed was superior to his own hay pile. Harold snored like a disgruntled monk and had a habit of sleep chewing, which made Fergus nervous. Greta didn't mind. She believed sleep was a shared experience, a nightly ritual of warmth, whispers, and the occasional hoof to the ribs. Her children would drift off to tales of enchanted bread and heroic muffins. Harold would curl up beside her, emitting soft bleats and the occasional philosophical grunt. The family bed served many purposes. It was a heater in winter, a gossip hub in summer, and a fortress against nighttime fears. If someone had a bad dream, they'd simply roll over and whisper it to the nearest sibling, parent, or goat. Comfort was immediate. Advice was questionable. Greta's bedtime routine was legendary. She'd tuck Fergus into his dough bowl, hum a lullaby about a knight who fell in love with a cinnamon roll, and gently nudge Harold off her pillow. Then she'd lie back, stare at the ceiling beams, and wonder if her dreams would involve flying baguettes or talking ovens. Sometimes she dreamt of a future where everyone had their own bed, where goats slept in barns, dough fermented in kitchens, and pillows weren't shared with hooves. But mostly, she dreamt of bread, warm, crusty, and slightly magical. And so, in the flickering candlelight of her humble home, Greta and her crew settled into the family bed, a pile of limbs, wool, and sourdough dreams. It wasn't quiet, it wasn't spacious, but it was love, wrapped in straw and snoring. In the medieval peasant bed, warmth was a communal resource, and blankets were the battleground, with entire families and livestock crammed into one straw-stuffed mattress. The nightly struggle for fabric dominance was real, relentless, and occasionally hilarious. Greta the baker, known for her sourdough lullabies and goat-sharing sleep style, had long accepted that her blanket was not hers alone. Each night, she tucked herself in, only to wake up with one corner of wool and Harold the goat wrapped like a burrito beside her. Blanket theft was an art form. Children learned early how to roll, tug, and feign innocence. Harold, despite lacking thumbs, had mastered the muddied midnight snatch, a maneuver involving a slow hoof drag and a dramatic sigh that implied victimhood. Greta once tried sewing her blanket to her nightshirt. Harold responded by chewing through the thread. To survive the chill and chaos, peasants developed strategic spooning. It wasn't romantic. It was tactical. The warmest sleeper went in the middle. The snore was placed near the goat. The person with cold feet was given a turnip to cuddle. It was a nightly game of positioning, warmth optimization, and avoiding Harold's hooves. Greta had a system. She called it the bread loaf formation. She'd lie in the center, children on either side, Harold at her feet, and Fergus the sourdough starter tucked safely under a wool flap. It wasn't perfect. Harold occasionally mistook Fergus for a snack, but it kept everyone moderately warm and mostly asleep. Arguments over blankets were common. One child would accuse another of hogging the wool. Harold would bleat in protest. Greta would declare a blanket truce, which lasted until someone sneezed and the whole arrangement collapsed like a poorly built pastry. Despite the nightly chaos, there was comfort in the closeness, the rustle of straw, the soft breathing, the occasional goat snore. It was messy, noisy, and deeply human, a reminder that sleep, in its weirdest forms, was still a shared ritual of warmth, love, and tactical fabric negotiation. And so, as the village settled into its second sleep, Greta adjusted her blanket, nudged Harold off her pillow, and whispered good night to Fergus. The stars blinked overhead, the wind hummed through the shutters, and the family bed, tangled and cozy, dreamed on. In the medieval age, sleep didn't always come naturally. Between straw mattresses, snoring goats, and the occasional midnight goblin, people often needed a little help drifting off. Enter the world of sleep potions, herbal brews, fermented mysteries, and tonics so strong they could knock out a night mid-sermon. The most popular remedy, poppy syrup, sticky, bitter, and brewed with the precision of someone who's been awake for 3 days. It was the medieval answer to insomnia. Just a spoonful could send you into a dream so deep you'd wake up speaking Latin, or at least mumbling something that sounded like it. Then there was sleep ale, a tavern specialty made with hops, honey, and whatever herbs the brewer hadn't mistaken for salad. It was soothing, mildly intoxicating, and occasionally caused visions of dancing turnips. Side effects included snoring in public and confessing secrets to furniture. Oswald the tavern keeper was a sleep potion enthusiast. His establishment, the Drowsy Duck, was famous for its bedtime brews. His signature drink? Nap nectar, a thick, golden ale infused with poppy, lavender, and a mysterious ingredient he refused to name. It's legal, he'd say, unless you drink it while standing. Villagers swore by nap nectar. 1 sip and you'd sleep like a saint. 2 sips and you'd dream of flying over the village in a breadbasket. 3 sips and you'd wake up in someone else's boots. Oswald claimed it cured insomnia, heartbreak, and mild existential dread. Greta, the baker, tried it once. She fell asleep mid-need and woke up with a loaf shaped like Harold the goat. Brother Alwyn drank it before evening prayers and accidentally recited a poem about cheese in front of the abbot. Hilda, the dream interpreter, refused to touch it, claiming it made her potato too chatty despite the occasional mishap. Sleep potions were beloved. They offered comfort, ritual, and a sense of control in a world where sleep was fragmented and unpredictable. People gathered at taverns, not just to drink, but to prepare for slumber, sharing recipes, stories, and theories about which herb made you dream of royalty. And so, as the village dimmed its lanterns and the stars blinked overhead, mugs of nap nectar clinked softly in the candlelight. Sleep came in sips, dreams brewed in barrels. And Oswald, ever the sleepy alchemist, wiped down his counter and whispered, "May your dreams be weird, and your snoring gentle." It started with a sip. Oswald the tavern keeper had no intention of founding a cult. He simply wanted people to sleep better, and maybe hallucinate fewer goblins. His brew, Nap Nectar, was a hit. Sticky, golden, and infused with poppy, lavender, and a dash of "don't ask." It sent villagers into dreams so vivid they woke up quoting poetry and hugging furniture. But then came the visions. One night, a farmer named Elric drank 2 mugs and dreamt of a glowing turnip that whispered the secrets of the universe. The next morning, he declared himself turnip prophet, wore a crown made of straw, and began preaching outside Oswald's tavern. "Sleep is the key," he cried. "Dreams are the door. Turnips are optional." Others followed. A baker dreamt of floating above the village in a sourdough cloud. A shepherd claimed his sheep spoke Latin in his sleep. Hilda, The dream interpreter was furious. "They're stealing my onions," she muttered, watching her clients flock to Oswald's tavern. With glazed eyes and bedtime robes, Oswald tried to downplay it. "It's just a drink," he insisted, polishing mugs and dodging questions about dream-induced enlightenment. But the villagers weren't listening. They began gathering at the Drowsy Duck every night, sipping nap nectar, sharing visions and sleepwalking in synchronized circles. They called themselves the Snorlings. Their rituals were gentle. They hummed lullabies, exchanged dream journals, and held blanket blessings where they wrapped newcomers in wool and whispered bedtime affirmations. One member claimed to have dreamt of a goat-shaped cloud that told him to forgive his neighbor's loud snoring. It was Harold. Harold was flattered. Brother Alwyn visited once, curious. He drank half a mug, wrote a poem about celestial cheese, and left with a blanket embroidered with the phrase, "Nap is sacred." He never spoke of it again. Oswald, now unofficial high priest of sleep, reluctantly leaned into the role. He created a menu of dream-enhancing brews: lucid lager, rem rum, and dozeberry wine. He installed a snore shrine in the corner of the tavern, featuring candles, feathers, and a mildly enchanted pillow. Despite the oddness, the cult was peaceful. No one argued. No one shouted. They simply slept, dreamed, and occasionally offered Harold the goat honorary membership. He declined, citing hooves and personal boundaries, and so, in the flickering candlelight of the Drowsy Duck, the Snorlings gathered, a sleepy congregation of dreamers, wrapped in wool, sipping strange brews, and believing deeply, drowsily, that sleep was more than rest. It was revelation. In the medieval world, sleep was not created equal. Where you laid your head said everything about who you were, and how many fleas you were willing to tolerate. Peasants slept on straw-stuffed sacks, often shared with family, livestock, and the occasional turnip. Their beds were scratchy, drafty, and smelled faintly of onions and ambition. Comfort was improvised. Privacy was theoretical, and warmth was a team sport. Monks slept on wooden slabs softened by wool and repentance. Their sleep was segmented, sacred, and frequently interrupted by bells, chants, and Brother Tuckwell's stealthy naps. They dreamed in Latin, snored in harmony, and occasionally mistook visions for sermon outlines. Nobles, however, slept like they were auditioning for a celestial mattress catalog. Their beds were carved from oak, draped in velvet, and stuffed with feathers, plucked from birds who probably had better things to do. Curtains hung thick to block out light, sound, and responsibility. Pillows were embroidered with family crests and passive-aggressive Latin phrases like somnus est virtus, sleep is a virtue, or non me tangere ante prandium, don't touch me before breakfast. Lady Euphemia of Giltshire was the reigning queen of bedtime drama. Her bed was a towering confection of silk, gold thread, and existential dread. She slept on a mattress stuffed with swan feathers and embroidered regrets. Her pillowcases were changed daily, her curtains steamed hourly, and her bedtime routine involved 3 servants, 2 candles, and 1 very confused bard. Euphemia believed sleep was a performance. She journaled her dreams, rated her naps, and once commissioned a tapestry of herself, sleeping heroically beneath a moon shaped like her own face. She referred to her bed as the chamber of reflection and occasional weeping. Meanwhile, peasants like Greta the baker curled up beside goats and sourdough starters, dreaming of warm bread and blanket equality. Their sleep was noisy, crowded, and deeply human. Euphemia's sleep was curated, scented, and occasionally narrated by a lute player. Despite the disparity, everyone dreamed. Nobles dreamt of power, monks dreamt of peace, peasants dreamt of porridge that didn't taste like disappointment, and somewhere in the middle, Harold the goat dreamt of being left alone. And so, across the medieval landscape, sleep unfolded in layers, gold and bones, velvet and straw. It wasn't fair, it wasn't equal, but it was sleep, and in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, everyone, rich, poor, poetic, and hoofed, closed their eyes and drifted into dreams stitched from the same moonlight. In medieval art and literature, sleep wasn't just a biological necessity. It was a metaphor, a message, and occasionally, a moral warning wrapped in velvet. Beds were symbols of status, virtue, temptation, and sometimes extremely poor carpentry. For nobles, a bed was a throne of rest. It signified wealth, lineage, and the ability to sleep without being kicked by a goat. Tapestries often depicted kings reclining beneath celestial canopies, their dreams swirling with angels, prophecies, and suspiciously flattering symbolism. One famous painting showed a knight dreaming of a sword made of light. Historians suspect it was actually a metaphor for indigestion. Lady Euphemia of Giltshire, ever the connoisseur of dramatic bedtime, commissioned a dream tapestry of herself asleep. It featured her lying gracefully on a swan feather mattress, surrounded by floating scrolls, moonlight, and a pillow embroidered with her family crest, and the phrase, "I dream, therefore I am." The pillow was given heroic eyebrows. She insisted the tapestry be hung in her dining hall. "Let guests know I am as noble asleep as I am awake," she declared, sipping lavender tea and adjusting her dream journal, which was bound in velvet and regret. In literature, sleep was often symbolic of transformation. Heroes received visions in dreams. Villains plotted in their sleep. Peasants dreamt of better porridge. One popular tale told of a maiden who dreamt she was a bird, flew over her village, and woke up with feathers in her hair. It was later revealed her pillow had exploded. Monks viewed sleep as a spiritual pause, a time for divine whispers and holy nudges. Brother Alwyn once wrote a poem comparing sleep to a sacred scroll that only the soul could read. It was beautiful, confusing, and mildly plagiarized from a cheese wrapper. Even peasants embraced sleep symbolism. Greta, the baker, believed dreams were messages from the flower spirits. She once dreamt of a loaf that sang lullabies and took it as a sign to invent bedtime bread. Harold the goat dreamt of being elected mayor. No one questioned it. Beds themselves were symbolic. A well-made bed represented order, virtue, and the ability to find matching sheets. A messy bed hinted at chaos, rebellion, or a goat with boundary issues. Euphemia's bed was so meticulously arranged, it was rumored to have its own scribe. And so, across the medieval world, sleep was more than rest. It was a canvas, a place where dreams painted meaning, beds whispered status, and pillows occasionally developed personalities. Whether noble or peasant, monk or goat, everyone slept beneath the same stars. And sometimes, those stars had opinions. When the Black Death swept through medieval Europe, panic spread faster than the plague itself. Villages emptied, prayers intensified, and sleep, once a nightly ritual of warmth and snoring goats, became a battleground of superstition and survival. Some believed sleep was dangerous. If you sleep too deeply, warned one traveling friar, you may not wake at all. Others believed sleep was healing, a divine pause where the body could recover and the soul could negotiate with celestial administrators. In the sleepy village, Snoringshire, the response was unconventional. Rather than flee, fight, or frantically bathe in onion broth, the villagers decided to nap through the plague. If we're unconscious, reasoned Elric the turnip prophet, we can't panic. And if we can't panic, we can't perish. Probably. They called it the Great Slumber Strategy. Beds were reinforced, blankets were doubled, poppy syrup was rationed like gold. Oswald the tavern keeper brewed a special batch of nap nectar called Plague Snooze, which included extra lavender and a hint of denial. Hilda, the dream interpreter, offered protective dreams for 2 onions and a firm handshake. Greta the baker baked sleep loaves, dense, warm bread infused with calming herbs and shaped like pillows. Harold the goat was appointed minister of naps, mostly because he refused to stand up and had a calming bleat. The villagers slept in shifts. Some napped during the day, others at night. A few tried sleeping for 36 hours straight, waking only to sip broth and mutter about prophetic turnips. Brother Alwyn wrote a poem titled Ode to the Blanket of Immunity, which was later set to music and hummed during communal snoozes. Remarkably, Snoringshire remained untouched by the plague, whether due to luck, isolation, or the sheer power of collective napping. The village endured. Historians remained baffled. The villagers remained drowsy. When the danger passed, the Snorlings emerged, blinking into the sunlight, stretching, yawning, and immediately requesting second breakfast. They declared sleep a sacred shield, built a monument shaped like a pillow, and held an annual festival of the nap, featuring lullaby contests and goat-led parades. And so, in the annals of medieval history, Snoringshire became a legend, not for battle, bravery, or breakthrough medicine, but for its bold belief that sometimes the best way to face disaster is horizontal. In medieval medicine, sleep wasn't just a time to rest. It was a diagnostic tool. Physicians, herbalists, and self-declared bodily interpreters believed that dreams could reveal everything from a brewing fever to a cursed spleen. If you dreamt of flying, you might have indigestion. If you dreamt of drowning, your liver was probably sulking. Enter Hilda, the village dream interpreter and part-time potato whisperer. Hilda had long insisted that dreams were the body's way of sending encrypted messages. She kept a ledger titled Nocturnal Diagnostics and Onion-Based Remedies, which included entries like Dream of floating turnips, equal sign mild ankle swelling. Dream of goat marriage, equal sign emotional blockage in the elbows. Dream of sneezing in Latin, equal sign royal pregnancy. That last one caused a stir. One morning, Cedric the stable boy sneezed during a nap and dreamt he was wearing a crown made of hay. Hilda declared him spiritually pregnant with destiny. Cedric was confused. The goat was unimpressed. The village held a parade anyway. Physicians were less whimsical, but equally baffled. They believed the quality of sleep could indicate health. Restless tossing, too much bile, deep snoring, excess phlegm, dreaming of cheese, possibly divine intervention, or a dairy imbalance. Brother Alwyn, ever the poetic monk, began recording his dreams in verse and presenting them to the monastery's herbalist. One entry read, "I dreamt of wheels of cheese that flew through skies of soup and morning dew. My stomach churns, my soul feels light. Prescribe me herbs and bread tonight." The herbalist prescribed fennel and a nap. Greta, the baker, once dreamt her sourdough starter spoke in riddles. Hilda interpreted it as a sign of yeast-related melancholy. Greta responded by baking a loaf, shaped like a smiling face. Harold the goat ate it and claimed to feel emotionally balanced. Despite the lack of scientific rigor, dream diagnosis was comforting. It gave villagers a sense of control, a story to tell, and a reason to visit Hilda with onions and questions. It turned sleep into a conversation between body, spirit, and occasionally root vegetables. And so, in the flickering candlelight of medieval bedrooms, dreams bloomed with meaning. Whether prophetic, poetic, or profoundly misinterpreted, they offered insight, comfort, and a touch of absurdity. Hilda stood ready, ledger in hand, potato nearby, and declared, "Sleep well and sneeze wisely." If medieval folks had Yelp, it would have been written on parchment, delivered by pigeon, and mostly filled with complaints about straw pokes and goat interference. Because when it came to mattresses, the options were rustic. Let's begin with the basics. Straw mattress material. Bundled straw in a cloth sack. Pros: cheap, abundant, mildly insulating. Cons: crunchy, itchy, occasionally home to beetles. Named Reginald Review. Slept like a sack of potatoes. Woke up with straw in places straw should never be. 3 stars. Greta, the baker. Moss mattress material. Dried moss layered over wood pros. Soft as earthy. Smells like forest secrets. Cons: damp in winter. Attracts squirrels. Review: dreamt I was a mushroom. Not sure if that's good or bad. Moss was cozy, but slightly judgmental. Brother Alwyn, feather mattress material. Goose or swan feathers in a velvet casing. Pros: luxurious, warm, makes you feel like royalty. Cons: expensive, explodes if sat on too enthusiastically. Review: felt like sleeping on a cloud made of entitlement. Pillow tried to give me advice in my dreams. Lady Euphemia, root stuffed pillow. Turnip edition. Material: turnips, onions, or other firm vegetables. Pros: doubles as midnight snack, allegedly prophetic. Cons: lumpy, attracts goats. Review: my pillow told me secrets. Then Harold ate it. Would recommend for dream clarity, not durability. Agnes, the turnip prophetess. Goat adjacent. Sleeping arrangement material. Straw, wool, and one very opinionated goat. Pros: warm, interactive, bleats lullabies. Cons: hooves and ribs, blanket theft. Review: Harold is a terrible blanket, but an excellent conversationalist. Sleep quality, unpredictable. Greta, the baker, monastic, wooden slab. Material: wood, wool, and spiritual guilt. Pros: durable, humble, encourages early rising. Cons: zero bounce. Dreams often involve repentance. Review: woke up feeling holy and slightly bruised. Ideal for those who enjoy asceticism and back pain. Brother Tuckwell, despite the discomfort, medieval sleepers made do. They fluffed straw, rearranged moss, bribed goats, and occasionally stuffed their mattresses with regrets and lavender. Comfort was relative, sleep was sacred, and reviews were mostly whispered to neighbors over porridge. And so, as the stars blinked overhead and villagers tucked into their crunchy, mossy, or feathered nests, the medieval mattress market thrived, quietly, scratchily, and with a surprising number of turnips. In the winding hills, Beyond Snoringshire, there lived a bard named Wimble, whose songs were famous across 3 villages, 2 monasteries, and 1 goat-led cult. But Wimble had a peculiar gift. He could only sing when he was asleep. By day, he was quiet, thoughtful, a bit sneezy, but by night, tucked beneath his moss-stuffed mattress and a blanket embroidered with musical notes and crumbs, Wimble became a one-man lullaby orchestra. His snores harmonized, his breath kept rhythm, and his dreams composed melodies no waking mind could match. Villagers would gather outside his cottage just to hear him sleep sing. Children curled up with woolen dolls. Elders nodded along. Harold the goat bleated in key. Wimble's songs were soft, strange, and soothing. Tales of moonlit bread, floating pillows, and turnips that danced politely. One night, Brother Alwyn transcribed a full verse. Lay down thy head, let worries flee. The stars shall hum a tune for thee. The straw may poke, the goat may snore, but dreams shall open every door. It became the unofficial anthem of bedtime across the region. Greta baked lullaby loaves. Hilda claimed Wimble's dreams were divinely fermented. Oswald served nap nectar with a side of Wimble's greatest hits, hummed by a sleepy choir of tavern regulars. Wimble never remembered his songs. He'd wake up, stretch, and ask, "Did I snore in D minor again?" The villagers would nod, teary-eyed and well-rested. He'd shrug, sip warm milk, and go back to bed. As the years passed, Wimble's sleep songs became legend. His cottage was renamed the Snore-atorium. Pilgrims came from afar, bearing blankets and onions, hoping to hear the bard's next nocturnal masterpiece. He never disappointed. And so, as the medieval world spun on, full of straw beds, turnip pillows, goat spooning, and dream-led diagnoses, Wimble sang on in sleep. His lullabies drifted through the night air, wrapping the land in warmth, whimsy, and a gentle reminder that even the weirdest sleep habits could be beautiful. And now, dear listener, our tale comes to a close. You've wandered through midnight cheese poetry, blanket battles, and goat-led bedtime rituals. You've met monks who nap in confession booths, nobles who build lavender moats, and bards who sing in their sleep. So, wherever you are, London, or curled up in a hayloft with a suspiciously musical goat, may your dreams be soft, your mattress be moss-free, and your sleep be uninterrupted by goblins or turnips. Like and subscribe if your pillow hasn't whispered to you yet. Drop a comment below and let me know where you are listening from. Whether it's your cozy bed, your medieval-themed blanket fort, or somewhere between first and second sleep. And now, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let Wimble's lullaby carry you into the land of snoring nobles and prophetic potatoes. Good night.